Oh hi, I'm Marc. I've been a professional artist for over 20 years and today I want to walk you through every way that I know of making money as an artist. And along the way I'll tell you which ones I feel are more future-proof and which ones you should be a little cautious going into. I think you'll get a lot of value from this video, so let's get started. Oh, one more thing before we start. Every method on this list depends on two very important things: your skill level and your visibility. You know, even the best artists in the world can make money if nobody knows they exist. So you're going to need at least one public portfolio, ideally several, like Instagram, ArtStation, Twitter account, posting on Reddit, posting on forums, on Discord servers, even like smaller platforms like Imagine Effects and It's Art magazines. They're all worth exploring, and they're kind of the foundation that everything else is going to be built on. So with that, let's get started. So the first 5 methods will be the ones with the lowest barrier to entry. You can start earning from these even if you're still developing your skills. So I would say like level intermediate and above. So first, we're going to have commissions. This is how most artists will make their first dollar. Someone likes your style, like not how you dress, but how you draw. And well, they'll just pay you to draw something for them. The first money I ever made was through commissions on DeviantArt back in the days. It wasn't much, but it was like real money for doing something that I loved. And I had maybe just like a few thousand followers at that point, like 2,000. Now, I will say like the AI effect is definitely real when it comes to commissions to some extent, but I would say in general the demand has remained pretty steady because most people want your style, your art. You know, like for the most part, the people that would commission an artist like you before AI even existed, well, they would still be the same kind of people that would commission you now. Freelance job boards. So websites like Upwork, Fiverr, Behance, those all still have constant demand for illustration work. And it's a pretty good way to land your first like professional credit if you can land one of those gigs. AI has affected this industry to some extent, but it's still holding quite strong. It's one of those that might shrink a bit, but it'll never disappear. Now, in third, we have selling digital goods or products. Now, this one is bigger than most people maybe realize. So like on the artist to artist side, you can think of like brushes for Photoshop, Procreate, Clip Studio Paint, PSD files showing your process. Like all of these consistently sell really well on platforms like QBrush or Gumroad. There's actually also a lot of like self-published comics and a lot of more spicy art. Like if you're willing to put your morals aside, then there's definitely money to be made there. Unfortunately. Or fortunately, I don't know. But now if we move on to like the game developer side, you can sell stuff like environment packs, character models, UI kits, brushes for sculpting software like ZBrush, like whatever goes into making the art of a game, really. QBrush.co, again, is a great marketplace for that, but also others like, you know, Fab and the Unity marketplace. The audience there will be typically like indie developers that don't necessarily have the budget to hire full-time artists. So instead, you can just buy, you know, pre-made assets. Either way, the beauty is the same. You make something once and then you sell it forever. It keeps making money. And this is also largely AI proof, I would say, because tools are for artists. Like the types of assets that you make might change, might evolve over time, but artists will always need tools, and that's not going away. In fourth, we have streamer and Vtuber assets. So this is a market that barely existed just a couple of years ago, and now it's booming. Like designing custom emotes, badges, overlays, and like channel art for Twitch or YouTube streamers. There's huge volume of demand here because streamers are constantly rebranding themselves, and like new ones are popping up every day almost. And then if we go on the Vtuber side, like designing character sheets and beyond that, like live 2D models, well, that's even more lucrative. Like custom Vtuber models will go like to a couple $100s on the low end to several thousands of dollars for like fully rigged models. Personally, I have no experience with that. It's pretty alien to me, but quite fascinating. Now in fifth, we're gonna have prints on demand. So websites like Redbubble, Society6, InPrint, all of those guys will handle the printing and the shipping. So you basically upload your art, slap it on a bunch of different merch, and then you get a cut of the sales. So of course you could be selling like art prints, but also mugs, like t-shirt, towels, mouse pads, you know, pretty much anything you can print something on. Now, the margins are pretty small, like just a couple of dollars maybe per item, but you know, if you pair that with a decent social media audience, then you can start to rake in some decent passive income. semi-passive income because you have to keep, promoting it. Now, those platforms are definitely getting flooded with AI garbage, so standing out will for sure require a very distinct style and, an audience that specifically seeks your work. All right, for this next batch, it'll require a solid reputation or a big following, or both usually. But the earning potential here jumps significantly. So in 6th, we'll have YouTube and content creation. So if you can teach or entertain or just create compelling art content, whatever that might be, YouTube and TikTok are obviously fantastic platforms. So you have the ad revenues, you have the sponsorships, and of course the audience that you're building that eventually can become a really good funnel for anything else you might have to sell. Like I started my channel in 2011 just as a side hustle for fun. Like there was no money to be made back then. But over the years, what it did is build an audience that hopefully trusts me, right? And well, that audience became the foundation for everything else in my career. The catch is obviously that it takes a lot of time and a lot of consistency. And maybe to not be too self-conscious as well, because chances are you'll be pretty cringe for a long time if you're anything like me. If I could, you can, because I'm one of the most introverted person ever. This, not natural at all for me. It took me a good 10 years to stop cringing whenever I watch back my videos. Maybe longer. But what's cool is that every video you create, just keeps working for you forever. It just stays online, which is pretty rare for most kind of work. Now in 7th, we have art streaming. It's kind of related to content creation, but it's pretty different beast. Some artists will make decent earnings just sharing their process on Twitch or on YouTube Live. So the revenues will range from subscriptions, donations, and if you're big-brained, you can work on your commissions live on stream. So you're getting paid for the art and you're getting paid by people watching you create the art. And of course, it also doubles as portfolio work and audience building. So if you're someone who can work on your art and talk to an audience at the same time, if you enjoy this interactive side of things, well, that might be a great fit. Now in 8, we have Patreons and subscriptions. So even if you have a pretty modest following, offering exclusive content like process videos, maybe different PSDs with all the layers so people can open and kind of study what you're doing, having private community access maybe, or early release access, well, that recurring income can add up pretty quickly. And this is super future proof as long as you're building this, genuine relationship with your audience. And that's something that AI probably won't be able to replicate. That's the same kind of recipe that Sam Does Arts and many others use. His video's primary purpose is to funnel people into his Patreon, where he can get paid. Because ad revenue on YouTube really is insultingly low compared to most other types of channels. And I think going about it this way is way better than having a random sponsored segment in the middle of your videos, like every other YouTube channel. In 9th now, we have Webtoons and Webcomics. So you have platforms like Webtoons or Tapas that will pay creators through ad revenue sharing and readers tipping. So if you can tell and illustrate a story and have a consistent schedule, well, there's a big audience waiting for it. This stuff's super popular. Top creators on those platforms can easily earn in 6 figures, and even mid-tier creators with a dedicated audience can still pull in a pretty livable wage. And the IP you create this way remains yours, which is going to be important for something that we're going to be talking a little bit later in the video. So if you love sequential art and storytelling, this might actually be the most fulfilling option on this entire list. And it's definitely something that I wish I'll be able to do at some point in the future. All right, in 10th, we have conventions, art conventions, Comic-Cons, anime expos. Now for those, depending where you live, if you live in the United States, for example, there's multiple throughout the year, so you could technically be doing this full time. So you work on a bunch of art, go sell it at a convention, and then rinse, repeat every month. And I actually know a few people here that make 6 figures doing that, and that's basically all they do with, other stuff, but they pull in 6 figures just from that. Now, from what I've heard, this is very exhausting. My wife does that, but doing that, you're able to kind of build this in-person loyalty almost, that's very hard to replicate online. And this is about as AI proof as it gets, because people at your table are coming to see you as a person. They want the interaction, they want the signed print, that whole experience. Now in 11th, we have selling courses and educational content. My bread and butter. So if you have any kind of expertise and you're able to communicate it clearly, teaching is probably one of the most high leverage thing you can do as an artist. You just have to create a course once, or multiple courses, and then they generate income forever. Kind of. Like, I took this to the extreme by working on my art program for 2 years, full time, like 40 plus hours a week. And I'm still updating it to this day, 9 years later, but now with over 31,000 students. It's definitely become the most fulfilling and certainly financially rewarding thing I've ever done. And now so many of my old students are making a living with their own art. It's just the best feeling ever. And I have to say, as the sponsor of this video, we're celebrating the 9th year anniversary this month with a massive discount live right now and until the end of the month. So check the link down in the video description for all the details. Now, it's not just an art course, it's an actual full university curriculum. So a full program to take anyone from 0 to pro level, which, like I said, many of my students are now. And I don't say this enough, but all the major game studios in the world have licenses for art school to train their own employees. So check it down below. I think you'll be glad if you do. Also, I love you more. But this applies well beyond my own experience. Now, I don't believe there's a full curriculum like mine anywhere else, but many artists out there are earning enough to live on just from selling focused courses on things like character design, environment painting, that kind of stuff on platforms like Udemy, Skillshare, Domestika, etc., or selling directly to their audience for higher margins on platforms like QBrush.co again, or other similar ones like Teachable or Proco. Now, this is going to be super AI proof because people learning online, they want to learn from someone who's been through it and someone who they trust. Now, obviously, you're gonna need to have a solid experience, to back something like that. So it's definitely more of a late game strategy, but it's a good one and it's super fun to teach others and see them improve their own art as a result. Now, in 12th, we have mentoring, which is slightly different. So this will be like one-on-one or like small group mentorships like I've done for many years. And well, you just review student work, you give them feedback, and you try to guide their development, like pretty hands-on directly. For this, the hourly rate is going to be pretty high and you don't need to build a full curriculum to get started. If you just have a couple of years of experience and you can articulate your craft, articulate your methods, your process, well, there's pretty much artists at every level that would gladly pay to have someone that's further ahead than them teach them the ways. And this also pairs really well with like streaming or content creation because your audience already knows your work and hopefully they trust your eye. All right, now this is where the ceiling gets really high on average. So these paths will usually require like years of skill building and a professional network to some degree, but the financial rewards can be exceptional. So in 13, we have studio jobs. So working at a game studio, animation studio, film studio, either as a concept artist or like a character artist, environment artist, 3D artist, whatever your specialty is. I spent just a little over 10 years doing that, and the last 7 of those were spent at Blizzard Entertainment, where I worked on games like Overwatch, StarCraft, Heroes of the Storm, and the pay was excellent, like towards the higher end of the range that you're seeing on screen here. Although Blizzard's been kind of crashing out in recent years, so I'll probably go somewhere else now. But yeah, the stability, the benefits, and of course the experience of working with like some of the top artists in the industry, well, you can't really get that in many places. Now, the downside is that the industry has gone through some pretty brutal mass layoffs recently. But I wouldn't necessarily blame that on AI. I would say it's more the symptoms of a post-COVID like hiring frenzy that really couldn't be sustained in a terrible economy that we're in. For the time being, though, it does mean that you would have to like take your craft to the next level because competition is definitely a lot fiercer. Way more than what I got in the industry, for sure. Now, these things are always temporary. You just don't know like how many years before it stabilizes. But yeah, and by the way, like for those curious, I got my first job as a game developer from social media, or AKA DeviantArt back in the days. Like an art director from a local studio just happened to see my stuff online and sent me an offer. And then I worked there for a couple of years, kept posting online, and then the same thing happened again, but with Blizzard this time. So a recruiter spotted my stuff, sent me an offer, and I moved on to Blizzard. Now, everybody's story is going to be different, but that's mine. So that's why, I always really stress on having an online presence because it's given me my entire career. And recruiters everywhere, they're always on social media trying to find, people to hire. Now in 14, and this is starting to get like pretty high level, but you have freelancing for studios and brands. Studios will often hire freelancers like contractors to work or to help fill up like a team when they're crunching at the end of a project or something like that, or if they need help for any reason, rather than hiring somebody full-time. And like big brands, well, they need illustrators for promotional work, packaging, ad campaign, like social media content, whatever. And I'm just grouping these two together because the hustle, is kind of similar. But there's a bit of a distinction to make here because big brands usually have much bigger budgets than studios do. And AI here has much less of an impact because usually it's not just about the art, it's also about who you're hiring. And anyways, you need to collaborate with like a team of creatives and follow art direction, go through multiple revisions. It's a whole like team process. And very often what the brands are after is not just your art, like I was saying, but also your clout. They might want the exposure that you have as a popular artist, and that comes as a premium. Now for the last two, in 15, we have licensing and IP ownership. So this is gonna be like the really long game, but arguably also the most financially rewarding out of the bunch. So like if you create original characters or like worlds and you retain the intellectual property, well, you can license that to use on products, in media, maybe in video games. Like some artists have built entire businesses around their own characters or like the world that they created. Like another example might be like all the webtoons that have been turned into anime. Like my own IP, Chroma Island, is not there at all, but in the distant future, that's kind of the goal. One day. And now in 16, the last one, speaking at events or workshops. So once you've built a strong enough reputation, and this is really like a late game, events or like companies will pay you to come and talk in person at their events, at their company, to their employees. Now, this obviously requires you to be well known in the industry. So, this is something that you'll have built over years and years. And if you didn't know, it's certainly something that you can make a good amount of money doing. Now, to wrap this all up, I think one thing is important to mention is that the artists who earn the most usually won't rely on just one of any of the methods we've seen, right? It'll always be like a stack of methods. Like maybe you have a studio job as your base and you sell digital assets on the side, or you have a YouTube channel that funnels more hardcore fans to your Patreon. Some of these jobs on their own might not be necessarily sufficient, but when you add a bunch of different ones together, that can really add up to financial stability. And the beauty is that if one gets sort of disrupted, well, you always have the other or the others to fall back on. So diversify your income the same way you diversify your skills. And on that topic, if you want to start building the skills that will open all of these doors, watch this video that will appear on screen here next, where I break down the most efficient daily routine to level up your art as fast as possible. I'll see you there. Click the link, bro.